Jamaica is an island country in the Caribbean Sea and the West Indies. At 10,990 square kilometers, 4,240 square miles, it is the third largest island, after Cuba and Hispaniola, of the Greater Antilles and the Caribbean. Jamaica lies about 145 kilometers, 78 nmi, south of Cuba, 191 kilometers, 103 nmi, west of Hispaniola, the island containing Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and 215 kilometers, 116 nmi, southeast of the Cayman Islands, a British overseas territory. The indigenous Taino peoples of the island gradually came under Spanish rule after the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1494. Many of the indigenous people either were killed or died of diseases, after which the Spanish brought large numbers of Africans to Jamaica as slaves. The island remained a possession of Spain, under the name Santiago, until 1655, when England, part of what would become the Kingdom of Great Britain, conquered it and named it Jamaica. It became an important part of the colonial British West Indies. Under Britain's colonial rule, Jamaica became a leading sugar exporter, with a plantation economy dependent on continued importation of African slaves and the descendants. The British fully emancipated all slaves in 1838, and many freedmen chose to have subsistence farms rather than to work on plantations. Beginning in the 1840s, the British began using Chinese and Indian indentured laborers for plantation work. Jamaicans achieved independence from the United Kingdom on the 6th of August 1962. With 2.8 million people, 1011, Jamaica is the third most populous Anglophone country in the Americas, after the United States and Canada, and the fourth most populous country in the Caribbean. Kingston is the country's capital and largest city. Most Jamaicans are of sub-Saharan African ancestry, with significant European, East Asian, primarily Chinese, Indian, Lebanese, and mixed-race minorities. Because of a high rate of emigration for work since the 1960s, there is a large Jamaican diaspora, particularly in Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The country has a global influence that belies its small size. It was the birthplace of the Rastafari religion and reggae music, and such associated genres as dub, ska, and dancehall, and it is internationally prominent in sports, including cricket, sprinting, and athletics. Jamaica has sometimes been considered the world's least populous cultural superpower. Jamaica is an upper-middle-income country, 15, with an economy heavily dependent on tourism. It has an average of 4.3 million tourists a year. Jamaica is a parliamentary constitutional monarchy, with power vested in the bicameral Parliament of Jamaica, consisting of an appointed Senate and a directly elected House of Representatives. Andrew Holness has served as Prime Minister of Jamaica since March 2016. Jamaica is a Commonwealth realm, with Charles III as its king. The appointed representative of the Crown is the Governor-General of Jamaica, the office having been held by Patrick Allen since 2009. Etymology. History. Main article. History of Jamaica. Pre-Columbian Jamaica. There is no archaeological evidence of any human presence on Jamaica until about 500. A group known as the Redware people, after their pottery arrived circa 626, followed by the Taino circa 800, who most likely came from South America. They practiced an agrarian and fishing economy, and at their height are thought to have numbered some 60,000 people, grouped into around 200 villages headed by caciques, chiefs. The south coast of Jamaica was the most populated, especially around the area now known as Old Harbor. Though often thought to have become extinct following contact with Europeans, the Taino in fact still inhabited Jamaica when the English took control of the island in 1655. Some fled into interior regions, merging with African maroon communities. The Jamaican National Heritage Trust is attempting to locate and document any remaining evidence of the Taino. Spanish Rule, 1509–1655. Main article: Colony of Santiago. Statue of Christopher Columbus in St. Anne Parish. Christopher Columbus was the first European to see Jamaica, claiming the island for Spain after landing there in 1494 on his second voyage to the Americas. His probable landing point was Dry Harbor, called Discovery Bay, 33, and St. Anne's Bay was named St. Gloria by Columbus as the first sighting of the land. He later returned in 1503, however, he was shipwrecked and he and his crew were forced to live on Jamaica for a year while waiting to be rescued. One and a half kilometers west of St. Anne's Bay is the site of the first Spanish settlement on the island, Sevilla, which was established in 1509 by Juan de Esquivel but abandoned around 1524 because it was deemed unhealthy. The capital was moved to Spanish Town, then called Santiago de la Vega, around 1534. Meanwhile, the Tainos began dying in large numbers, both from introduced diseases and from enslavement by the Spanish. As a result, the Spanish began importing slaves from Africa to the island. Many slaves managed to escape, forming autonomous communities in remote and easily defended areas in the interior of Jamaica. Mixing with the remaining Taino, these communities became known as maroons. Many Jews fled the Spanish Inquisition to live on the island. They lived as conversos and were often persecuted by the Spanish rulers, and some turned to piracy against the Spanish Empire's shipping. By the early 17th century it is estimated that no more than 2,500–3,000 people lived on Jamaica. Early British period. Main article: Colony of Jamaica. Henry Morgan was a Caribbean pirate, privateer, plantation owner and slaveholder. He had first come to the West Indies as an indentured servant, like most of the early English colonists. The English began taking an interest in the island and, following a failed attempt to conquer Santo Domingo on Hispaniola, Admiral William Penn and General Robert Venables led an invasion of Jamaica in 1655. Battles at Ocho Rios in 1657 and the Rio Nuevo in 1658 resulted in Spanish defeats. In 1660 the Maroon community under the leadership of Juan de Bolas switched sides from the Spanish, and began supporting the English. With their help, the Spanish defeat was secured. In 1661 English civil government was formed and Roundhead soldiers turned their attention to governance and agricultural responsibility. When the English captured Jamaica, most Spanish colonists fled, with the exception of Spanish Jews, who chose to remain. Spanish slaveholders freed their slaves before leaving. Many slaves dispersed into the mountains, joining the already established maroon communities. During the centuries of slavery, Jamaican Maroons established free communities in the mountainous interior of Jamaica, where they maintained their freedom and independence for generations, under the leadership of Maroon leaders such as Juan de Serres. Meanwhile, the Spanish made several attempts to recapture the island, prompting the British to support pirates attacking Spanish ships in the Caribbean. As a result, piracy became rampant on Jamaica, with the city of Port Royal becoming notorious for its lawlessness. Spain later recognized English possession of the island with the Treaty of Madrid, 1670. The English authorities sought to rein in the worst excesses of the pirates. In 1660, the population of Jamaica was about 4,500 white and 1,500 black. Early 1670s, as the English developed sugar cane plantations worked by large numbers of slaves, black Africans formed a majority of the population. The Irish in Jamaica also formed a large part of the island's early population, making up 2/3 of the white population on the island in the late 17th century, twice that of the English population. They were brought in as indentured laborers and soldiers after the conquest of 1655. The majority of Irish were transported by force as political prisoners of war from Ireland as a result of the ongoing wars of the Three Kingdoms. Of large numbers of Irish to the island continued into the 18th century. A limited form of local government was introduced with the creation of the House of Assembly of Jamaica in 1664. However, it represented only a tiny number of rich plantation owners. In 1692, the colony was rocked by an earthquake that resulted in several thousand deaths and the almost complete destruction of Port Royal. 18th–19th centuries. Main article: Slavery in colonial British America. A plantation set alight during the Baptist War of 1831–32. During the 1700s the economy boomed, based largely on sugar and other crops for export such as coffee, cotton and indigo. All these crops were worked by black slaves, who lived short and often brutal lives with no rights, being the property of a small planter class. In the 18th century, slaves ran away and joined the Maroons in increasing numbers, and resulted in the First Maroon War, which ended in stalemate. The British government sued for peace, and signed treaties with the Leeward Maroons led by Cudjoe and Accompong in 1739, and the Windward Maroons led by Quayo and Queen Nanny in 1740. A large slave rebellion, known as Tacky's War, broke out in 1760 but was defeated by the British and their Maroon allies. After the second conflict in 1795–96, many Maroons from the Maroon town of Cudjoe's Town, Trelawney Town, were expelled to Nova Scotia and, later, Sierra Leone. By the beginning of the 19th century, Jamaica's dependence on slave labor and the plantation economy had resulted in black people outnumbering white people by a ratio of almost 20 to 1. Although the British had outlawed the importation of slaves, some were still smuggled in from Spanish colonies and directly from Africa. Citation. Needed. While planning the abolition of slavery, the British Parliament passed laws to improve conditions for slaves. They banned the use of whips in the field and flogging of women, informed planters that slaves were to be allowed religious instruction, and required a free day during each week when slaves could sell their produce. 56. Prohibiting Sunday markets to enable slaves to attend church. Citation. Needed. The House of Assembly in Jamaica resented and resisted the new laws. Members, with membership then restricted to European-descended Jamaicans, claimed that the slaves were content and objected to Parliament's interference in island affairs. Slave owners feared possible revolts if conditions were lightened. Harbour Street, Kingston, c. 1820. The British abolished the slave trade in 1807, but not the institution itself. 57. In 1831 a huge slave rebellion, known as the Baptist War, broke out, led by the Baptist preacher Samuel Sharp. The rebellion resulted in hundreds of deaths and the destruction of many plantations, and led to ferocious reprisals by the plantocracy class. As a result of rebellions such as these, as well as the efforts of abolitionists, Britain outlawed slavery in its empire in 1834, with full emancipation from chattel slavery declared in 1838. The population in 1834 was 371,070, of whom 15,000 were white, 5,000 free black, 40,000 colored, or free people of color, mixed race, and 311,070 were slaves. The resulting labor shortage prompted the British to begin to import indentured servants to supplement the labor pool, as many freedmen resisted working on the plantations. Workers recruited from India began arriving in 1845, Chinese workers in 1854. Many Jamaicans are descendants of South Asian and Chinese people. Over the next 20 years, several epidemics of cholera, scarlet fever, and smallpox hit the island, killing almost 60,000 people, about 10 per day. Citation. Needed. Nevertheless, in 1871 the census recorded a population of 506,154 people, 246,573 of whom were males, and 259,581 females. Their races were recorded as 13,101 white, 100,346 colored, known as the Browning class, and 392,707 black. There was an economic slump in this period, with many Jamaicans living in poverty. Dissatisfaction with this, and continued racial discrimination and marginalization of the black majority, led to the outbreak of the Morant Bay Rebellion in 1865, led by Paul Bogle, which was put down by Governor John Eyre with such brutality that he was recalled from his position. His successor, John Peter Grant, enacted a series of social, financial and political reforms while aiming to uphold firm British rule over the island, which became a Crown colony in 1866. In 1872 the capital was transferred from Spanish Town to Kingston. Early 20th century. Marcus Garvey, father of the Back to Africa movement and Jamaica's first national hero. In 1907, Jamaica was struck by an earthquake which, together with the subsequent fire, resulted in considerable destruction in Kingston and caused the deaths of between 800 and 1,000 people. Unemployment and poverty remained a problem for many Jamaicans. Various movements seeking political change arose as a result, most notably the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League founded by Marcus Garvey in 1917. As well as seeking greater political rights and an improvement for the condition of workers, Garvey was also a prominent Pan-Africanist and proponent of the Back to Africa movement. He was also one of the chief inspirations behind Rastafari, a religion founded in Jamaica in the 1930s that combined Christianity with an Afrocentric theology focused on the figure of Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia. Despite occasional persecution, Rastafari grew to become an established faith on the island, later spreading abroad. The Great Depression of the 1930s hit Jamaica hard. As part of the British West Indian labour unrest of 1934–39, Jamaica saw numerous strikes, culminating in a strike in 1938 that turned into a riot. As a result, the British government instituted a commission to look into the causes of the disturbances. Their report recommended political and economic reforms in Britain's Caribbean colonies. A new House of Representatives was established in 1944, elected by universal adult suffrage. During this period Jamaica's two-party system emerged, with the creation of the Jamaican Labour Party (JLP) under Alexander Bustamante and the People's National Party (PNP) under Norman Manley. Jamaica slowly gained increasing autonomy from the United Kingdom. In 1958 it became a province in the Federation of the West Indies, a federation of several of Britain's Caribbean colonies. Membership of the federation proved to be divisive, however, and a referendum on the issue saw a slight majority voting to leave. After leaving the federation, Jamaica attained full independence on 6 August 1962. The new state retained, however, its membership in the Commonwealth of Nations, with the British monarch as head of state, and adopted a Westminster-style parliamentary system. Bustamante, at the age of 78, became the country's first prime minister. Post-independence era. Main article: Independence of Jamaica. Strong economic growth, averaging approximately 6% per year, marked the first 10 years of independence under conservative JLP governments. These were led by successive prime ministers Alexander Bustamante, Donald Sangster, who died of natural causes within 2 months of taking office, and Hugh Shearer. The growth was fueled by high levels of private investment in bauxite, alumina, tourism, the manufacturing industry and, to a lesser extent, the agricultural sector. In the 1967 Jamaican general election, the JLP were victorious again, winning 33 out of 53 seats, with the PNP taking 20 seats. In terms of foreign policy, Jamaica became a member of the Non-Aligned Movement, seeking to retain strong ties with Britain and the United States whilst also developing links with communist states such as Cuba. Michael Manley, Prime Minister 1972–1980 and 1989–1992. The optimism of the first decade was accompanied by a growing sense of inequality among many Afro-Jamaicans, and a concern that the benefits of growth were not being shared by the urban poor, many of whom ended up living in crime-ridden shanty towns in Kingston. This led to the voters electing the PNP under Michael Manley in 1972. The PNP won 37 seats to the JLP 16. Manley's government enacted various social reforms, such as a higher minimum wage, land reform, legislation for women's equality, greater housing construction and an increase in educational provision. Internationally, he improved ties with the Communist bloc and vigorously opposed the apartheid regime in South Africa. 26. In 1976, the PNP won another landslide, winning 47 seats to the JLP's 13. The turnout was a very high 85%. However, the economy faltered in this period due to a combination of internal and external factors, such as the oil shocks. The rivalry between the JLP and PNP became intense, and political and gang-related violence grew significantly in this period. By 1980, Jamaica's gross national product had declined to some 25% below its 1972 level. Citation. Needed, seeking change. Jamaicans voted the JLP back in 1980 under Edward Seaga, the JLP winning 51 seats to the PNP's 9 seats. Firmly anti-communist, Seaga cut ties with Cuba and sent troops to support the U.S. invasion of Grenada in 1983. The economic deterioration, however, continued into the mid-1980s, exacerbated by a number of factors. The largest and third largest alumina producers, Alpart and Alcoa, closed, and there was a significant reduction in production by the second largest producer, Alcan. Citation. Needed, Reynolds Jamaica Mines Limited left the Jamaican industry. There was also a decline in tourism, which was important to the economy. Citation, needed, owing to rising foreign and local debt, accompanied by large fiscal deficits, the government sought International Monetary Fund (IMF) financing, which was dependent on implementing various austerity measures. These resulted in strikes in 1985 and a decline in support for the Seaga government, exacerbated by criticism of the government's response to the devastation caused by Hurricane Gilbert in 1988. Having now de-emphasized socialism and adopting a more centrist position, Michael Manley and the PNP were re-elected in 1989, winning 45 seats to the JLP's 15. The PNP went on to win a string of elections, under Prime Ministers Michael Manley (1989–1992), Patterson (1992–2005), and Portia Simpson Miller (2005–2007). In the 1993 Jamaican general election, Patterson led the PNP to victory, winning 52 seats to the JLP's 8 seats. Patterson also won the 1997 Jamaican general election, by another landslide margin of 50 seats to the JLP's 10 seats. Patterson's third consecutive victory came in the 2002 Jamaican general election, when the PNP retained power, but with a reduced seat majority of 34 seats to 26. Patterson stepped down on the 26th of February 2006, and was replaced by Portia Simpson Miller, Jamaica's first female prime minister. The turnout slowly declined during this period of time, from 67.4% in 1993 to 59.1% in 2002. During this period various economic reforms were introduced, such as deregulating the finance sector and floating the Jamaican dollar, as well as greater investment in infrastructure, whilst also retaining a strong social safety net. Political violence, so prevalent in the previous 2 decades, declined significantly. In 2007 the PNP was defeated by the JLP by a narrow margin of 32 seats to 28, with a turnout of 61.46%. This election ended 18 years of PNP rule, and Bruce Golding became the new Prime Minister. Golding's tenure, 2007–2010, was dominated by the effects of the global recession, as well as the fallout from an attempt by Jamaican police and military to arrest drug lord Christopher Coke in 2010, which erupted in violence, resulting in over 70 deaths. As a result of this incident, Golding resigned and was replaced by Andrew Holness in 2011. Independence, however widely celebrated in Jamaica, has been questioned in the early 21st century. In 2011, a survey showed that approximately 60% of Jamaicans believed that the country would have been better off had it remained a British colony, with only 17% believing it would have been worse off, citing as problems years of social and fiscal mismanagement in the country. Holness and the JLP were defeated in the 2011 Jamaican general election, which saw Portia Simpson Miller and the PNP return to power. The number of seats had been increased to 63, and the PNP swept to power with a landslide 42 seats to the JLP's 21. The voter turnout was 53.17%. 81. Holness's JLP won the 2016 general election narrowly, defeating Simpson Miller's PNP, on the 25th of February. The PNP won 31 seats to the JLP's 32. As a result, Simpson Miller became opposition leader for a second time. The voter turnout dipped below 50% for the first time, registering just 48.37%. In the 2020 general election, Andrew Holness made history for the JLP by accomplishing a second consecutive win for the Jamaica Labour Party, winning 49 seats to 14 won by the PNP, led this time by Peter Phillips. The last time a consecutive win occurred for the JLP was in 1980. However, The turnout at this election was just 37%, probably affected by the coronavirus pandemic.
I say we keep them bad for tit and plod. You're the DJ Three Spade. You're the link darker than 3 shades.